Once upon a time, in a little village named Agba, there lived a girl named Ujunwa. Ujunwa wasn't like the other girls in the village. While most girls tried to make their waist very small so they could look pretty, Ujunwa didn't care about that. She loved eating all kinds of food: rice, beans, fish, and sweet treats. The more she ate, the bigger her waist grew, and the more people in the village began to talk about her. They would whisper behind her back, saying she was too big to be beautiful. Ujunwa didn't mind much at first. She was happy, just the way she was. She had a big, bright smile, and she loved to help her father, Mr. Ejike, with all the chores. But as she grew older, something started to change. The other girls in the village were slim and had small waists, and the men in the village seemed to like them more. Ujunwa felt lonely sometimes because no one paid attention to her. It wasn't because she wasn't kind or helpful, it was because she didn't have a tiny waist. Her father, Mr. Ejike, loved her very much and wanted her to be happy. But he also worried because all the other girls in the village were getting married while Ujunwa stayed home. He thought, what if Ujunwa never finds someone who loves her? He wanted the best for her, but he knew the village was strange about how they looked at beauty. One day, there was news that a young man named Chijioke was coming back to the village from the big city. He was handsome and kind, and many girls hoped he would pick them to be his wife. Mr. Ejike thought this might be a good chance for Ujunwa to find someone who would love her, so he told her to get ready. Ujunwa wasn't sure, but she trusted her father. She spent the whole day getting ready. She wore her nicest dress and tied her hair up nicely. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, this man would look past her waist and see how wonderful she was inside. But when Chijioke came to meet her, he looked at her for a moment and then turned away. He said he couldn't marry her because she was too big. Ujunwa felt a heartbreak. She ran to her room and cried for hours. Why didn't anyone love her? Why wasn't she good enough? Days passed and Ujunwa couldn't stop feeling sad. She looked out the window at the sunset and wondered if she would ever find someone who would love her. But one evening, something magical happened. As she sat by the river, she heard a voice calling her name softly. It called her 3 times. She turned around, and to her surprise, there was a glowing woman standing by the water. She looked different from everyone Ujunwa had ever seen. Her skin was blue and sparkled like the stars in the sky. It was a river goddess called Nwanyora. Everyone in the village had heard of her, but no one ever saw her. They said she could grant wishes to those in need. Ujunwa didn't know what to say, but she was desperate. She told Nwanyora everything. How everyone made fun of her because she wasn't slim, and how she just wanted someone to love her. Nwanyora listened carefully, and then told her she was beautiful just the way she was. But if she still thought a slim waist would make her beautiful, then by the next day, things would be different. The next morning, Ujunwa woke up and felt different. She looked in the mirror, and to her amazement, she was thin. Her waist was small, her face was glowing, and she felt light as a feather. She couldn't believe it. She rushed out to the village to show everyone, and when they saw her, their eyes grew wide, and they told her she looked so beautiful. The men in the village who once ignored her now looked at her with admiration. Ujunwa felt happy at first. She had the slim waist everyone wanted, and the village seemed to love her again. But something inside her began to change. The more people praised her, the more she began to want more. She remembered how Chijioke had rejected her, and how all the men had laughed at her before. She wanted them to feel what she had felt. She swore to herself that she would make all of them see how it feels to be left out. She went back to the river and called out to Nwanyora. She begged and said, She wanted all the men to feel her pain and know what it felt like to be left out. Nwanyora appeared again. Her face filled with sadness, she told Ujunwa that was not the path to happiness. Revenge will only bring more pain. If she chooses revenge, it will come back to her. But Ujunwa didn't listen. She was so angry that she couldn't see the wisdom in Nwanyora's words. She insisted to make the men suffer. Nwanyora sighed and said very well, but reminded her that it wouldn't end well. The next morning, all the men in the village woke up feeling weak and tired. They couldn't do anything right. Their hands shook when they tried to walk. They looked down and discovered that their manhood was gone. They went to the village healer, but she couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then they remembered Ujunwa. She was the only one who had changed overnight, and they thought that somehow she was the reason for their weakness. They rushed to her house, but Ujunwa smiled and told them that they must marry her if they wanted to be strong again. The men didn't have a choice. They agreed to marry her, hoping that it would make them strong again. And when they spent time with her, they saw their manhood. But the moment they left her house, it disappeared. The men couldn't understand what was happening, and neither could their wives. The wives went to the village healer, who told them about the magic Ujunwa used. They decided to take action to stop the spell. One evening, after everything had become so strange, the wives of the village gathered together by the river. They were worried about what had happened to the men. No one could understand the magic that had made them weak, and they needed to find a way to fix it. So they called out to Nwanyora, the river goddess, hoping that she could help them. Nwanyora appeared, her glowing blue skin shining in the moonlight. The wives kneeled by the water and begged her to remove the spell from their husbands. They explained how Ujunwa's magic had hurt the whole village and how they needed to make everything right again. Nwanyora listened carefully, her glowing eyes watching them closely. She told them that to break the spell, the men would have to show their love for Ujunwa. The only way to do this was to spend the night with her, as a sign of respect and love. Only then would the spell be broken. The wives went back to the village, unsure, but knowing there was no other choice. They gathered the men and told them what the river goddess had said. The men did not want to, but they knew it was the only way to regain their strength. One by one, they went to Ujunwa. It was awkward and strange for everyone, but the men did as they were told, staying with her through the night. By morning, the men were strong again, and their manhood was restored, but Ujunwa felt something that was not happiness. She had done what was asked of her, but it didn't feel like the love she had hoped for. The men had done what was needed to break the spell, but there was no respect or kindness in their eye, just the coldness of duty. The river goddess appeared again, and the spell was lifted, but Ujunwa felt no joy. She had learned that her waist, her beauty, and her worth were never truly seen for who she was inside. The men may have regained their strength and manhood, but they hadn't seen her as a person. They had only seen her as a way to undo the curse. The magic was gone, but the emptiness remained. Ujunwa walked through the village, seeing the familiar faces, but none of them seemed to look at her the same way. Her heart was heavy, filled with the weight of knowing that she would never truly be loved for herself. And though the village slowly returned to normal, something had changed forever in Ujunwa's heart. She would never again be the same. The lesson was clear, but the sadness stayed with her. A reminder that love, kindness, and respect were things she would never truly find in the village. And Ujunwa lived on, carrying the burden of a beauty that no one ever truly understood. The end.